And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're talking about Castle Dice. Actually not about the base game, but about its expansion, which is called More Castles. Now Castle Dice has this ridiculously sized box. Unfortunately, that means this expansion is going to fit easily in the box, except for the insert doesn't handle it, so you're going to have to lose the insert if you want to add the expansion to it. Now this expansion doesn't add a whole lot. It adds basically kind of some upgrades to the original game, and then players' own decks of cards. Here we go. The first thing this expansion adds is some replacements. In the original game, you have these glass beads, which are a little bigger than the numbers that are needed, and you can't really see the numbers underneath them anyway. So this expansion just adds these really small little tokens. They're almost too small, but once you get them on the track, it doesn't matter, and they're really easy to move around. So that's a nice addition. The game also comes with some of these tokens here, so that if you have the most pigs, for example, you have the pig leader, or the horse leader, or the chicken leader, or the cow leader. In fact, if you have the pigs, they also give you the pork chop, which you can use once per round, and this token reminds you if you used it. And then also this helps keep track of who has the most villagers and most animals. And they also provide some victory point tokens for different cards and things that provide victory point tokens. Where this expansion really differentiates those between the castle deck that came in the original game, well, now there are 4 castle decks, so each player is going to take one of these castle decks, and it's going to be your deck. So instead of drawing from a communal deck, you'll draw from one of each of these decks, your own deck, and so you can go through your deck. Now this has some benefits to it. One, when you're going through a deck, you know that you can find the cards you want. It's not someone else drew them. But also, each deck is asymmetrical here, and that there are differences between them. Each of the decks, for example, has a royal wedding card, and I love these cards because you basically can take a card from the discard pile to your left. So you might be sitting there and discarding cards, but you're sitting there thinking, I gotta be careful because my opponent might take one of them into my hand. Each of the decks has a different style of theme. So here we have basically the merchant style deck, and he has the accountant, which is a great card because it lets you lower the cost of another card by 3 gold, pay a merchant, or draw a castle card. In fact, these guys are great at drawing cards. Draw a village card and a castle card. Here you can re-roll all the animal dice if you want to, and this one you get to pick the dice that everyone chooses that turn. You pick what round, so you can pick the dice that you need, hopefully, with the astronomer. And then you got safe walls, and each one has different buildings. The guild hall here, the courthouse, the toll bridge, the bazaar. Here you can change resources for other resources. And the colossal tower. The purple one has the biggest points in the game with the 5-point towers, 2 of them, and they cost 1 less for each wall that you have. Then we have the resource guys. Actually, I would call these guys the farmers. I'm surprised they put a picture of this here. I would have put a picture of animals here, because here you can, if for each animal type you have the most of, you get to gather an extra time. Here you get an extra build. You can turn resources into 2 other resources. Here you can change one of your villagers into a farmer with the musician. Here that's another trade animals for animals of other types. So you draw a castle card and a village card. Then you have perimeter walls, and you can use animals here and put them on a perimeter wall, and if you have the most of that type of animal, you get a victory point. Here, when you build this wall, you get an animal. Like I said, these guys are about the animals. The meat kitchen lets you change an animal to gold, stone, or wood. So these guys have some neat abilities. They don't go up to 5 like the other one I showed you, but this one here costs 2 less resources for each wall that you have, the ancestral tower. Then we have these guys are military, or they're against the barbarians. So here this doubles the barbarians that everybody else has. This marshal here lets you re-roll 3 dice, which could be barbarians. Here you can draw some of your village cards from the discard pile. And again, remember, even though everyone is not using the communal castle pile, you still will use the communal village pile. Here, this guy gains 1 of each resource where you have a guard. So this encourages you to get guards out. And then you have different walls. In fact, the lookout wall gives you a guard when you build it. And a secret passage where barbarians actually lower the price of the secret passage. This costs 1 gold or less for each wall that you have. This is a great card, the Armory. Instead of drawing a market card, you can just take a victory point, which is a very useful thing to have, and another reason they have the victory point tokens. And then the barracks, which aren't anything special, but fit with the theme of this deck. And then finally, we have these guys, the building guys with the hammer. And this person here gets to... this is kind of an interesting card. Basically, you let the person choose what you're going to gather, which isn't a big deal. I mean, because usually that means you're going to get something. However, you can search your castle deck for any building. So you can go through here and find any cards you want. Here, before you pick this, you get a resource, and everyone rolls an extra die of that resource. So this gives you a good chance to get a lot of one type of resource out there. Or here, you can pick a resource type and put all that type to their maximum production. Now you have to be careful when playing these guys because it is possible to help everybody else more than yourself. Or here you gain a resource where you have a worker. So again, these guys are all about the resources. The garden wall, if you have 5 workers at the end of the game, you get a victory point. So get a couple garden walls out, you get some extra victory points. This counts as 2 villagers when figuring out who gets extra points at the end of the game. And you got the inn and the celebration hall and the deep well, the reinforced gate, the workshop, and the town square, which costs 1 less of each resource for each building you've already built. So these guys, again, fit with their theme. And that's pretty much everything in the expansion. There are some rules for alliances where you basically go split up in partners and you can share. You can re-roll each other's barbarians with different cards. You can share resources. If your resources go above 9, you give your extra resources that you've gathered to your opponent. And then your score at the end is you combine it to see who wins. This is a good expansion in the fact that it adds the extra pieces. I think that having whoever's the leader of each of the animals, that's a great thing. I don't have to keep explaining horses means you go first, pigs means you get the pork chop. Now it's written on those tiles and you pass them around. And the little pieces and the victory points. And you could sit there and you could say, this stuff should have been in the original game. Perhaps, but I mean, it's nice that they came in and kind of fixed that stuff. I don't know that it was broken, but it just makes the game nicer. But that wouldn't be reason enough to get the expansion. I think that you have to look at the card decks. Even the alliance rules, they're interesting, but you could just download those off the internet or figure them out on your own. The decks of cards are really nice. I like them quite a bit because they give you a little bit of theming to who you are. You have your own deck. And like I said, there's 2 good reasons. One is the fact that you can go through your deck. If there was something I noticed with Castle Dice, it was occasionally when you play, you could draw a bunch of cards at the end and you wouldn't have any point cards because other people drew them. And that could sway whether you won the game or not. Now you know what point cards you have in the deck. You can go through them and find them on your own. So that's a good thing. Also, the decks are different. You saw how they were. The builders, you build more buildings. The one guys, you get more animals. The one guys, you work with the barbarians. They're not like immensely different. Then they have a lot of the same feel. And some of the cards themselves are cards that actually came from the original Castle deck. But I like them. I think I'll never play with the original Castle deck again because this is something I could play with new people. They don't even have to know the difference really. That they have their own Castle deck. So this isn't like an essential expansion, I don't think, but it's a nice one. It adds a few small minor things, barely changes gameplay at all, but does give you something different and makes you feel slightly more unique. And if that's something you're looking for, then you'll be glad to make this big box have a little bit more of its room used up. Dice Tower Judgment, approved.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!